What's up, everybody? This is Patrick, fictivefun.com. This next grouping of videos is a few more days answered on RPG a Day 2018, and some of the questions I answered while I was driving around in my truck, so I don't know how the sound quality is on them, but hopefully you can hear them well enough to hear what I said about each of the questions. I really don't understand how this question is supposed to be answered. The wording of it is weird. What game mechanic inspires your play the most? If a game mechanic's going to inspire your play, it's going to inspire it within the game that the mechanic occurs in, right? You know, for example, if you say seduce or manipulate from Apocalypse World, and, you know, if you say that inspires your game, then you're playing Apocalypse World, right? I mean, does it inspire your game outside of Apocalypse World? I mean, if you bring a mechanic from one game into another, you know, you're playing a house rule game or a hacked game that you're playing. You're not playing the game, you know, as written, per the rules. You know, there's no problem with that. You know, everybody plays house ruled stuff, or they hand wave stuff, or, you know, at different bits, but when you talk about a mechanic that inspires your game or inspires how you play the game, I don't think that's the greatest question. I mean, sure, it's going to inspire your game within that game because that mechanic was designed to inspire a certain type of play within that game, you know. It could be, you know, in a narrative-based game, a certain mechanic will inspire a certain type of narration. Mechanics in, you know, more strategic games are going to inspire a certain type of strategy. If you're playing a warrior, you want to bash shit. If you're playing a wizard, you want to cast spells. If you're playing a cleric, you want to heal. I mean, the mechanics are built into the class or playbook, so you play that character a certain way, or they're built into the game so you play the game a certain way. All mechanics are going to inspire you within that game. Now if the question was worded like, what mechanic do you like the most, that would make more sense. Or what mechanic would you port over into all your other games? That question makes more sense because it's basically asking, what's your favorite mechanic you wish all games had? So I'm going to answer that question. What mechanic is my favorite that I wish a lot more games had? And that mechanic, surprise, surprise, comes from Swords Without Master, which you know, it's beating a dead horse. Everybody knows it's my favorite game. But the mechanic that really gets me there is the threads and motifs. The reason I love it so much is because it is a pacing mechanic. It tells you when the game is over. When you fill in those 3 motifs, you move into the end game, and then when those motifs are reincorporated, the game's over. And it ends right there. But you can also have an epilogue at the end in case you need to tie up a few things, if you feel it needs an epilogue. Now, when you're running a campaign, and say you're going to have 4 or 5 sessions, 6 sessions, 7 sessions, whatever, in this campaign, where is your stopping point in each session? Okay, I mean, do you just cut it off and say, you know, look, we're ending it here? Do you have to like finagle the story in order so you get to a good ending point? Because maybe one of the players that, you know, that session was kind of focused on is not going to be there next week, or, you know, for whatever multitude of reasons, you got to finish at a good stopping point so where your players can jump back in the next time they remember what happened, and all that, so you can continue that arc. But with one-shots, games that are designed for one-shots have that ending. The game ends here, you know. Regardless of what happens, when you get so far into the game, it ends here. And success or failure, the game ends here. And my favorite version of that is the Swords Without Master motifs and threads and mysteries and morals Because I just think it's great. You know, you're because you take these ideas from earlier in the game and you're throwing them right into the end game, and it's basically a callback. And everybody loves callbacks. You know, especially in like episodic TV shows. You know, when you have a callback to something from like 3 seasons ago, and you know, if the TV show's well followed, the internet, you know, blows up. Ooh, do you remember that? You know, do you remember when that happened? Of course, we all remember when that happened. We all saw it. Swords does it on a more per session level, and I think that move from Epi is just genius. That mechanic. I mean, I'm sure I'm not the most versed in like all the little different types of independent games and stuff that came out, so I don't know where Epi got the inspiration for that mechanic, but I absolutely love it. You know, maybe one time I'll ask him, you know, where'd you come up with that? Because that's by far my favorite thing. In Swords Without Master. So, yeah, if there was a mechanic I was going to port in any other game, it'd be that specifically for the one-shots. So, I'm a big fan of the Apocalypse World system with the 2d6, with the partial success, full success, fail curve on the rolls. That really appeals to me. I love the idea of a partial success being the majority of the rolls you're going to get are going to be partial successes. I just love how there always seems to be a complication in taking an action and Powered by the Apocalypse games. So yeah, that's probably the dice mechanic that appeals to me the most. I also like roll under systems, such as like, you know, some of the OSR systems where you have to roll under your stat on a D20, you know, as a check. I like that system. It's simple. Makes a lot of sense. Ties it into the character's attributes. You know, I just wish there was more of that system involved in that with, you know, a partial success versus just success and failure. I think just adding in that partial success is what makes me like Apocalypse World, or Powered by the Apocalypse games over other games, you know, when it comes to like skill checks. I realize, you know, a GM can do a partial success, but when you just have success or failure on a roll without it being written into the rules, a player may, you know, feel like you're getting over on them if they succeed in a skill check and you give them a consequence. But when it's baked into a game like the Powered by the Apocalypse games, they know the consequences there. You know, when they get a 7 and 9 on those 2d6, they know there's going to be a consequence. So, you know, it's not like the GM's trying to get over on them for any reason. But yeah, that's my dice mechanic that appeals to me the most. Well, as far as non-dice systems, you know, it seems like most games you either use dice or playing cards. I mean, the vast majority use dice as far as tabletop role-playing games. But there's a few games I can think of that use cards. The Protocol series, it uses cards. Final Girl, which is a game I love, uses cards. You know, as far as a non-dice system, as long as it gives you that scaffold for storytelling, you don't even need like a conflict resolution system, you know. A lot of it's just like free roleplay. Like, you think of like Fiasco. Yeah, there's dice in that game, but it's more for the randomization at the beginning and at the end. But there's really no conflict resolution in that. Not that I remember. But like, there's a lot of story games out there that just give you the scaffolding for storytelling, and a lot of them use cards for randomization or even dice for randomization, but it's not a conflict resolution. That's just played out, you know, in-game through free roleplay, through improv or what have you. I would say, like, when I'm looking at conflict resolution, I really like the mechanic in Final Girl, where you're pretty much just playing high card wins. It's simple, it's easy. You throw your card down, The killer puts their card down, you put your card down to beat it. If you can't, the character dies. If you can beat it, the character survives, at least until the next time the killer comes after them. But yeah, I like the card mechanic in Final Girl because it's just so simple. A game I hope to play again in the future is one I played a few months back. It was a story game, and it was a very simple setup, but I really enjoyed the game. And that game was Eden. Super simple, told a great story. I just love to play it again. I don't know if it's a game that you can play over and over and over again, week after week. As most, narrative story games, you don't tend to want to play that, week after week after week after week. But yeah, Eden. I just had a great time playing it, and I really enjoyed the stories that came out of it, and the laughs that came out of it. It was really fun, and hopefully I can bring it to the table. I'll perhaps run it online, like when we played last time. We ran it online with the collaborative, drawing board for drawing out the map. But yeah, it was really fun. Some parts are kind of cute, seem kind of childish. Other parts, gets pretty deep. But, for the most part, I had a really fun time. There was a lot of great laughs when I played it. So yeah, that's definitely a game I want to play again. Eden. I don't even know how to answer this question. There are so many RPGs out there that deserve greater recognition. I can't even name them all. When you tell somebody that you play tabletop RPGs, and if they don't know what that is, a lot of times it's explained, oh, it's kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, and then they understand. So, Dungeons and Dragons is the king of the hill. Everybody knows what that is. It's like the generic name for tabletop RPGs now. It's like calling a soda a Coke or a Pepsi. It's like the two biggest names out there for soda. And if somebody didn't know what a soda was but knew what a Coke or Pepsi was, they pretty much understand it. And it's like that now. If somebody doesn't know what a tabletop RPG is, but you tell them it's like Dungeons and Dragons, oh, they understand. Because a lot of people know what Dungeons and Dragons is, but they don't know that Dungeons and Dragons is a tabletop RPG and there's other ones like it. So yeah, there's a bunch of RPGs out there that deserve greater recognition. But if I were to choose one, man, I mean, it's really hard for me to choose one because I played so many that are really, really fun and I think deserve a lot more recognition, than they get. And when you think about the indie space of tabletop RPGs, there's a lot of entries in there, and a lot of it's spread thin between them. And I think Powered by the Apocalypse games probably got the bigger slice of indie RPGs. Lamentations of the Flame Princess have a pretty big following in the OSR community. But if I had to pick one that needed more recognition, or I think deserves more recognition, is Cheat Your Own Adventure. And why I say Cheat Your Own Adventure is because it's such a simple game and anybody can play it. You don't have character sheets. There's no real math involved in it, except for rolling 2d6 and beating a target number, but that's not a conflict resolution thing. That's just saying whether your narration turns out good or bad for the protagonist. I know it can be tough to label that a tabletop RPG because many people have different definitions for what a tabletop RPG is, but it is a game. Cheat Your Own Adventure is a game, and it's a really fun game to play with beginners, people that don't even play tabletop RPGs. But as a game, I think it needs more recognition because it's super simple. It's a lot of fun. You can tell stories in all different types of genres with it. So if you're looking for it online, it's Cheat Your Own Adventure. Uh, it's been run on the Gauntlet countless times, and it's a really fun game. And I think it deserves more recognition. You know, as a game in itself. You know, it's just one of those games that the rules are so simple. You don't need the sheet of rules really. You just run with it. You know, it's a pick up and play. You need 2d6, and you can play it. You can play it anywhere. You got a group of people, play Cheat Your Own Adventure. I think it deserves more recognition than where it's at now. So if I were to name a game that had an impact on me this past year, that would probably be Dialect. It's one of those games where after you play it, you know, it just kind of sticks around with you. You know, it gets stuck in your head. You know, you're thinking about it for a few days after the game. So I love games like that. You know, where you think about them, you think about what happened, and yeah, Dialect was one of those games. I think it's because you're dealing with language, and language is a huge part of our lives. And then when you're creating language within the confines of creating a story, you tend to carry that with you for a little while. Um, and that's my interpretation of it. Dialect's super fun game. I'm gonna be running it at GauntletCon this year. Um, yeah, I can't wait to play it again. This is Patrick from fictivefun.com. I appreciate everybody watching. Y'all have a good day.